From a young age, he was clear with what pattern of life he wanted to live, and true to it. His life has been one of commitment to the love of country. He's one of those whose vision caught in their youth has become like the proverbial fig tree, providing cover for many. On this edition, we present to you Mr. Atedo Peterside. I'm Susan Ilian. Welcome to Amazing Africans.
But how long are we going to continue in suffering? We are going to settle this matter once and for all. We are not going to stop until they reverse the petroleum price of 65 naira.
Jonathan told your subsidy.
Jonathan must revert to 65 naira per liter. Go tell them that this is the Nigerian spring.
In January 2012, heavy protest greeted the decision of the federal government to remove the fuel subsidy, which increased pump price from 65 naira to 141 naira. Protesters gathered across the country from Sunday, January the 1st, when the policy took effect, to Monday, January the 16th, 2012, after its partial reinstatement, leaving the price at 97 naira. But in the middle of that chaos, there were a few voices who supported the decision of the Goodluck Jonathan-led government. One of them was Mr. Atedo Peterside.
When he believes in something, he stands up for it. He's not afraid to speak his mind. Some people may take offense because that is how he is, but he doesn't mean anything ill. He will tell you exactly, he'll speak his mind. And so he's willing to take on even causes that may be a little unpopular. I recall 2 or 3 incidents. I remember during the Abiola annulment, he was one of those who came out publicly against the annulment. I also remember during the time that Goodluck Jonathan wanted to remove the oil subsidy. He was a part of the economic team. Being a part of the team, he came out and defended it. Even though at that time it was most unpopular to come out, he defended it and he explained it and he stood his ground.
When Mr. Peterside founded Investment Banking and Trust Company Limited in 1989, he was just 33 years of age. The bank came after 10 years of him working with the Nigeria Acceptances Limited, more commonly called NAL Merchant Bank, which was licensed as Nigeria's first merchant bank in 1969. Surrounded with young minds, most of them in their 20s, with him being the oldest, was how IBTC gains its hold and found its footing.
I was already working with Mr. Peterside in NAL Merchant Bank, the credit and marketing department at the time. So I knew, his track record, I knew his professionalism, I knew his capabilities. So it wasn't so much a leap of faith in terms of I would continue working with him. There were a few other people as well in the bank that were part of the foundation team. So I think it was easier. And I also believe because we were young also, when you're young, you are able to take on more risks. But it didn't seem as scary as, it might seem now. We were looking for an office, and the only office that was readily available was right next to NAL Merchant Bank in Wesley House, So we thought, look, should we take this office? It's so close to NAL Merchant Bank. But in the end, we thought about it and said, look, it's just a storm in the teacup. Let's take it. It's available, So we started with 1 floor, and we later expanded to 2 other floors in that building. And that's where we were until we moved in 2000 to Victoria Island, to our present location.
In 2019, when the bank marked its 30th anniversary, Mr. Peterside shared the throwback pictures of the earliest days of the bank. With him are Angela Omodare, who was company secretary and the legal advisor. Then Olawale Edun, who is now Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister for Economy. Next to the minister is Yewande Bawo, now Oluwande Moyo, who was the head of finance at the beginning. In the back row is Shola Adegoroye, who is now Shola David Bora. She was the head credit and marketing. Beside her is late Toyi Daniju, who was the head of international department. 28-year-old Shola Adegoroye is now over 63 years. She served as chief executive of Stanbic IBTC Holdings, PLC, between 2012 and 2017. Having the global accounting doyen Mr. Akintola William declare open the head office of the bank in the year 2000 is one event Mr. Peterside takes with so much pride.
He's a very forthright person. He always tells you what he thinks, so you are never confused as to what direction you should go. He gives you feedback immediately. Very professional, very hardworking. So you work hard, if you're with him. And he also gives you opportunities to grow. Well, he's completely detribalized. He focuses on the capabilities of the individual, the talents of the individual. So it doesn't matter where you come from, in Nigeria. His leadership skills was very important in, first of all, bringing us together as a team, and driving the vision of what IBTC wanted to be. I'm sure many people know he's fearless. He was always commenting on the events of the day. In fact, I remember during the military regime, which was quite challenging, he would write opinion pieces, that we thought would get everybody in trouble. So he was fearless, forthright, and very focused.
When in 2004, the central bank came with the policy to allow for merger and acquisitions, Mr. Peterside showed cold feet because of his apprehensions that some of his workers may lose their jobs. From data, there are over 175 Stanbic IBTC bank branches in Nigeria, and Standard Bank Group operates in at least 20 countries in Africa. Mr. Peterside has continued to frown at regulations which favored the youth of his days, but now skewed in ways as to scheme the youth of present-day Nigeria out of those possibilities. 10 years of working experience. At the tender age of 33, you started your own bank. And I know that you've mentioned elsewhere that the environment that you were able to thrive in Nigeria has changed significantly. How does that relate to the youth today?
Well, you've got to remember that, I think if you check the history books, General Gowon was head of state from sometime in 1966. I believe if you check, he himself was age 31. So please tell me, can a 31-year-old make rules to outlaw or keep young people out of any activity? He himself was 31. So Nigeria has changed considerably. What happened is that that generation of Gowon and those after him who got into positions of authority, he was 31. At the time, they allowed 30-year-olds who were their mates to do everything. The problem was that, and I'm not referring to Gowon now because he's not the culprit, as they got older, they constantly revised upwards the age requirements for everything to limit it to their own generation. So it was a case of some people thinking when they were in their 30s, oh, being 30 years is old enough. When they moved to their 40s, they wanted to redefine things to be 40 and above. And then they became 50. So they constantly were moving the goalposts to the detriment of the youth that came after them. So that's why you will find that General Buhari was the minister in his 30s. But when he now came to appoint his first cabinet as a civilian president, I think there was only one minister that was 50 years old. The rest were older. Now that just captures what I've been describing. You were a minister in your 30s. Nobody thought you were a genius necessarily. When you became a head of state, civilian head of state, you then believed that every other 30-year-old in Nigeria didn't qualify. Almost every 40-year-old didn't qualify. So this is why I'm talking about a generation that constantly, moves the goalpost. Or they took, each time youths tried to climb, they took the ladder away and constantly kept revising things upwards. I'll give you an example of banking. When I started with IBTC, the rule was that you needed 10 years banking experience. After that, they changed the rule to say you needed 20 years banking experience. So which means that if I had been a little older and I'd been trying to begin IBTC after 15 years, I would have been told, sorry, you're too young. So they revised it, so that we bring it to the present day. Then later on, they realized that 20 years experience was excessive, and they brought it down to 15. But that just tells you the journey. There is no scientific evidence to prove that the problems in the banking sector were caused necessarily by the younger bank CEOs than me. Indeed, some of the banks that failed were promoted by very elderly people, but they turned around and blamed the youth for everything.
Hence, the environment today for the youth is certainly not reflective of the environment during your time, and that's what you're...
Yes, because the youth don't have the same opportunity they had during Gowon's time when he was 31. I believe indeed, I'm from Rivers State. The governor of Rivers State, if you go and check, was Alfred Detesprief. I think he was 29. Today's youth don't have those kind of chances because these same people have constantly revised everything upwards to exclude them.
Arguably, Mr. Peterside was one of the youngest bank founder and CEO of his days. But unarguably, he was one of the youngest in the entire school when he gained admission to the King's College, Lagos, at age 10 years. That was in 1966.
In King's College, we have what we call core values. We have about 6 core values: truth, honesty, obedience, patriotism, integrity, and chivalry. Looking at the life of Atedo Peterside, he has imbibed and showcased all these core values of King's College. Even after school, you can see that he has distinguished himself in his chosen career as an entrepreneur and an investment banker. Not just that he's an old boy of King's College, but a former president of King's College Old Boys Association.
I got to King's College at age 10. I was a boarder. I was the youngest boy in the entire school. So again, I was left struggling to keep up with people who were older than me. Everybody in the class was older than me, not to mention those in the classes above. So there was a constant challenge of trying to keep up with people older than you. And when I look back at many things I've done in my life, I think those early struggles to keep up with people who were older, more mature, helped to define me in several ways.
His youth has been an advantage to him, particularly banking on the support from the home front.
I think the jury is out who was a stronger influence on me, my father or my mother. My guess is my mother. Some people think it's my father, but my guess was my mother. I think the most important thing I learned from my father, that was very important, my father taught me to carry out due diligence. Don't take things as face value. Don't trust everybody. Double check everything. In effect, believe that some people are out to dupe you, to cheat you, and all that. So don't let your guard down. And that was very important, even in business. I can't remember the last time anybody managed to dupe me. But my mother was the one that day to day taught me about morality, taught me about ethics, taught me about, gave me the inspired confidence, made me believe. You know what mothers can do? They can almost convince you that you're the brightest human being on earth because you're their son. And guess what? If you start believing that, then you start doing things that others will be scared of doing.
He's uncompromising about his love for country, which has made him always find his way back home, no matter where else he travels to.
During my time in the UK, interestingly, because I finished with a master's degree from LSE in 1977, and many of my classmates and other colleagues were thinking about working in the UK to get some experience, I was in a great hurry to run back to Nigeria. And some of them kept asking me about, what is the hurry about? Let me tell you what it was about. At the time, Nigeria was going through an oil boom. So all the papers, the newspapers, the media had the situation where entrepreneurs from Europe, Asia, the Far East, Asia, America, were going to Nigeria because there was an oil boom and it was meant to be a new emerging situation. So I told myself, I'll be damned if I'm a Nigerian. Foreigners are running back to Nigeria, and then I'll be running to the UK or running in the opposite direction. I also want to run back with them and join the fun and help to take part in what should be a thriving economy. And for the record, I have absolutely no regrets.
What motivates you professionally, and when do you feel satisfied?
Every time I'm on a flight coming back to Nigeria, let's say I go to an airport like London Heathrow to catch a Nigerian flight, many young people walk up to me and say, "Excuse me, sir, we were just gossiping when we saw you. That why do you live in Nigeria?" Because they feel that, some of them say, they thought if they were in my position and I have the ability to probably live anywhere in the world, why do I leave all that and come and stay in Nigeria? So that for me, home is Nigeria, and it's by choice. And I'm not saying Nigeria is wonderful. I've not found that country that I would like to go and sit down there and live there, for any length of time.
Will he keep quiet when things are going wrong? No, he won't. Right, and you will see that he's saying it and he's making those comments, because of his passion for the country, because of his interest in the country, because of his love for the country, right? Not to run down anybody, not to paint anybody, in bad light, but it's because of his genuine interest for the country. That is why, look, if you check most of the assignments, national, I will look at some of those assignments and say, hey, he will spend his own money, use his own personal whatever for hotel accommodation, transport, take himself to Abuja, go and work with some people, develop a document, vision, something, whatever for the country, without being paid. He will use his own resources, to serve. When you look at somebody who is paying to serve.
That same love for country was what he underscores for why he established the Go Nigeria initiative, which he used to rally the youth on the need for voter consciousness, resulting in improved youth participation in the election.
Go Nigeria was simply an effort to get younger people to be politically active, to get them to register, acquire their PVCs, so they could take part in elections, and to try and convince them that the future of their country was in their hands, and they were never going to get Nigeria to improve if they stayed out of it and were disinterested. And I think the campaign caught fire in the sense that when we began, you won't believe it, there were many educated youth that didn't know what a PVC was, which is a permanent voter's card. They said, "What's that? What's the meaning of PVC?" That showed you how much many of them had totally removed themselves from the political process. They had given up on their country, given up on elections, were disinterested. So the whole point of that campaign was to get a few young people to buy into the idea of saying, look, no matter how bad things are in Nigeria, guess what? Nobody is going to come and improve Nigeria from Australia, agreed, or from Argentina. Nobody is going to come and improve Nigeria from Jupiter or from Mars. The only people who are going to improve Nigeria are Nigerians. And it's the younger generation that have the future to worry about, not the very old ones. So if you don't take an interest in the political affairs of your own country, you are actually contributing to ensuring that the kind of change you would like would never happen. And that's how many of them got politically active. And that led to a variety of things, including possibly the last presidential election becoming a three-horse race, when historically, at least since 1999, everything was a two-horse race.
For those who may nurse doubt over his love for country, or those seeing it as a means to a presidential ambition, Mr. Peterside states his unwillingness to step up to that role.
I don't think that's my purpose. I think everybody should discover their purpose in life. I do not believe that that's my purpose. I think my purpose is more to be an influencer. So I have been close to presidents before. I was on the economic management team of President Yar'Adua, same under President Goodluck Jonathan. So even President Buhari's government, I was involved in the National Development Plan. So I think one has to be careful, because half the people who come out and insist that they must be the president or they must be the number one person, I think that's a very arrogant position to take, because you must look at 200 million people, look in the mirror and satisfy yourself that you are the person best able to lead them. If I look in the mirror and I'm not satisfied that I'm the person best able to lead them, I won't put myself forward. That would be a disservice to my nation. So I think when I say my purpose is to be an influencer, it's like people say historically, there's a difference between the king and the kingmaker. So perhaps I'm more of a kingmaker in the sense of being influential than seeking to be the king itself. So I can tell you if the crown fits the king or not. But I'm not the king. I don't kid myself for 1 second that I'm supposed to be the king.
As you approach the tender age of 69 years old, what further contributions and endeavors do you have in mind?
No, I'm not going to count my chickens before they're hatched, but I think all my efforts are concentrated largely in whatever I can do in several ways, some behind the scenes, to help to improve my country. I think in Nigeria there's a leadership challenge. I'm talking generally now, I'm not talking about one person. It's across the states, across local governments. So every day I do everything I can, and got other people, working with other people, to try and influence things in the direction of the type of improved leadership that Nigeria needs. Because that's the key. I know people talk about, okay, but you can only get good leaders if you have good followers. They may be right, but I beg to disagree. In Nigeria, there are many very good followers. The problem is leadership is not good enough. Let's call a spade a spade. And I'm talking about leadership that leads by example.
In spite of your membership of the Social Democratic Party, you didn't hide your support for the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi, of the 2023 presidential elections. Do you believe in him to have the magic wand to fix the challenges of the country?
Not that he had the magic wand, but I thought he had the best chance at the time when I looked at the candidates. I thought he had the best chance in terms of execution. There was not a lot of difference between the three major candidates in terms of their pronouncement of bold economic reforms like eliminating petrol subsidy, doing away with multiple exchange rates. So my choice at the time was influenced partly by who had the ability to execute best. And to execute, you have to lead by personal example. And you also have to be willing to sacrifice. So part of my reason, I never thought Peter Obi had two heads. For goodness sake, I know his strengths, I know his weaknesses. It was about whether I thought at the time he could lead by example, and I thought the country needed leaders that would demonstrate some belt tightening at the center and all that, and he seemed to have the profile for that.
He's retired as the chairman of Stanbic IBTC Bank and now focuses on other engagements like Anna Business Jets Limited, which launched in 2015 to provide a fractional ownership platform, jet cards, charter and aircraft management services in serving the business sector and catering to operation, maintenance, crewing, catering, and fueling the jets. He got himself neck deep into the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria, where he deployed the ANAP Foundation COVID-19 think tank.
The ANAP Foundation COVID-19 think tank was really about advocacy. You see, when COVID came out, I thought about how could I make a contribution? It was a major threat. Okay, now we are alive and we're discussing it. At the time, we didn't know whether we would be alive. We didn't know how impactful it would be in a negative sense. There were stories that there could be millions of dead bodies on Lagos streets and all that. So I asked myself, where can I make my biggest contribution? And I thought some people found it strange. It was in the area of advocacy. And let me explain. From my understanding of COVID, one of the most important things for COVID was for a government to manage it. A government must have credibility and must be able to communicate well. My fear was that the Nigerian government under Buhari did not have the credibility and would not be able to communicate well. So even when they told you something about COVID, people will not believe them. Because they're going to say, why should we believe these guys? So my fear was that there was a gap. So if I had this think tank, eminent persons or people that could contribute meaningfully from the 6 geographical areas, when the government makes a pronouncement that we think is correct, people will be saying, this government, do we trust them? Do we believe them? Don't listen to them. We will come out and endorse if it's right and say, this is what we think we should do. That also means that if the government was saying the wrong thing, we would come out and say we don't agree for the following reason, thereby influencing the government and also helping to improve the communication.
He is the chairman of ArtX Collective Limited and former chairman of Endeavor High Impact Entrepreneurship Limited, a nonprofit organization that provides mentorship and support to scale-up companies. His hobbies are in polo, reading, traveling, and boating.
He loves sports, maybe you may not know. He was an active polo player, in those early days. You were, hey, look, you don't want anybody to fall off the horse. Of course, he won't take undue risk, but very active polo player. He loved football.
He's married with children. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know. We'll bring you stories of other amazing individuals from the African continent. In the meantime, you can share with us names of those you think are deserving of celebration. I'm Susan Ilian. See you next time.